And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is another installment of creatures that should be commanders. So what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for creatures that are not legendary, because of course if they were legendary, they could be your commander. So I'm looking for really interesting creatures that I think sort of feel like legendary creatures, but more importantly, make for really interesting build-arounds. That's the important part. And this time I have enlisted a little bit of help from my patrons. I asked for a few suggestions from them. So some of these are from me, some of them are suggestions from my patrons. So let's get to it. Starting out at number 1, Death Tyrant, 4 and a black beholder skeleton 4/6 with menace. Whenever an attacking creature you control or a blocking creature an opponent controls dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. And you can pay 5 and a black, return Death Tyrant from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this is a card that I just stumbled across while doing a deck doctor for one of my patrons recently. I didn't even know it existed. I just think it is such an interesting card and would make for a great commander. Now, first of all, you have that ability at the bottom there where you can just return your commander, if this is your commander, from your graveyard to the battlefield tap, which is pretty great because then obviously you can avoid having to recast your commander all the time. But that ability there, I just think is super interesting. And even though it might not seem like much, and that's probably why this card flew under the radar, it is doing a whole lot. Whenever an attacking creature you control or a blocking creature an opponent controls dies, right? So it's two things that you are now building around. You want your attacking creatures to die, or you want your opponent's blocking creatures to die. So you're going to build around either of those. And then obviously as well, you're creating a 2/2 black zombie token. So you're doing a bit of a zombie theme as well. Interestingly enough, my patron had a Wilhelt deck that they had put this in. This is a fantastic fit here. And the reason why is because of course it's creating zombie tokens, which is great. But more importantly, the tokens you are creating with your commander have decayed. And the decayed mechanic works great here because you're going to attack with that zombie token. And then at the end of combat, you're going to sacrifice it. And like I just talked about in my rules video, a creature is still attacking as long as it is combat, right? So at the end of combat, when you sacrifice it, that is an attacking creature that has died and it will replace itself with another zombie. So it's a fantastic fit in that deck, but obviously you can build around that. So the decayed mechanic would work great here. Any sacrifice theme would work great here because you can attack with your creature, get in for damage, and then sacrifice it after damage is dealt to get this trigger from your commander. And then obviously destroying blocking creatures is great here too. You can do Death Touch Tribal if you want. So if your opponents block, you're going to kill their creature for sure, and then you're going to get a zombie token. You can force blocks as well. That would work great here. I just think this would be a really interesting build around, and I didn't even know this card existed. Coming in at number 2 is a card I have known existed for a long time, has always been a personal favorite of mine. It's a card that I have actually built a modern deck around before because I think it is such a great interesting card with a lot of build-aroundable abilities, would make a fantastic commander. Grand Architect, 1 blue, Vidalcan Artificer 1/3. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. So already we have something that we can build around. You could even just go a fairy tribal with this guy if you wanted to, because all your 1/1 flying fairies are going to get an anthem. So that already is something that we can build around. Pay blue, target artifact creature becomes blue until end turn. So that's something you can build around. But more importantly, that ability plays into the last ability, which is tap an untapped blue creature you control, add 2 colorless. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. And of course, there is so much you can do with that. Now, you're going to be in a mono blue deck, but mono blue artifacts is fine. There's a lot of support there. What's great about this ability is it is one of those abilities sort of like a Zami, right? In fact, exactly like a Zami, where there is no actual tapping going on here. You don't have the actual tap symbol, and Summoning Sickness only cares about the tap symbol. Whenever you have an ability like this that just says tap an untapped creature you control, means you can do it right away. Summoning Sickness does not apply. And of course, this ability, just like with a Zami, works on itself. So your Grand Architect can tap itself immediately as soon as you play it to add 2 colorless. And, you know, there is a lot of interesting things you can do here. I actually talked about this again on one of my Deck Doctor videos, how I made a modern deck with this guy. And my win con there was Colossus of Akros. Really interesting card. 8 mana artifact creature, 10/10 as Defender Indestructible. And you can pay 10 colorless mana, and it had this monstrous 10, which of course means you're going to put 10 +1/+1 counters on it. But then it loses defender and gains trample, so it becomes a 20/20 indestructible trample creature. And of course, in modern, that's just game over. And this seems ridiculous in modern, where everything is very low mana value typically, but this is just tap 4 blue creatures you control to cast this guy, tap 5 blue creatures you control to make him monstrous, right? That's how easily this will work in a deck like this, and that's the kind of interesting things you could do with a commander like Grand Architect, because that ability is casting artifact spells, but also activating artifact abilities. There's a lot of really interesting things you could do with this deck, I think. Coming in at number 3, Labyrinth Raptor. Black and a red, Nightmare Dinosaur 2/2 with Menace. Whenever a creature you control with Menace becomes blocked, defending player sacrifices a creature blocking it. And you can pay black and a red, creatures you control with Menace get +1/+0 until end of turn. So of course, this very easily can be a build around Menace Tribal, as we all know. I'm sure a lot of people when they first saw this card thought, man, I wish this was a commander. Obviously, you're giving that pump effect to your creatures with Menace. Also though, let's keep in mind it is a Nightmare Dinosaur, and those are pretty popular creature types. You could do a little bit of stuff there as well, I think. But most importantly, that middle ability, whenever a creature you control with Menace becomes blocked, the defending player has to sacrifice a creature blocking it. And of course, because it has Menace, has to be blocked by more than one creature, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to attack with your creature with Menace. Your opponent has to block with at least 2 creatures, and then that player has to sacrifice one of the creatures blocking it. A Strionic Resonator would be fantastic here, right? Copying triggered abilities, because when that opponent blocks with 2 creatures, you can copy the trigger from your commander. They're going to have to sacrifice a creature that has blocked your Menace creature. So they're going to sacrifice the one that they probably don't really want. And then because you've copied that triggered ability, when the second ability resolves, they're going to have to sacrifice the other one as well, right? Because the other one's already been sacrificed. They only have one left. You obviously could do a sacrifice tribal as well here, like Mayhem Devil. There's lots of cards that fit in the Rakdos sacrifice theme as well. So there is a lot you can do here. Other than just, I put a bunch of Menace creatures in my deck, there's a whole bunch more I think you could do around this guy as well. It would be a great build around. Coming in at number 4 is a really interesting one, and I had to throw one of these goofy old cards in here. Gargantuan Gorilla, 4 green ape. 7/7. And of course, 7 is that magic number that we like to see on our commanders. And I think this would be a little bit of a Voltron deck. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice the forest. If you sacrifice a snow forest this way, Gargantuan Gorilla gains trample until end of turn. If you don't sacrifice a force, sacrifice Gargantuan Gorilla and it deals 7 damage to you. So the part where you don't sacrifice a forest is never going to happen unless someone casts an Armageddon and you don't have any forest in play. That's always going to be an option for you. I don't think you really have to worry about, other than the fact that you have to sacrifice a land, right? Also, though, it has tap Gargantuan Gorilla deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. That creature deals damage equal to its power to Gargantuan Gorilla. So sort of the fight mechanic, right? It isn't actually the fight mechanic. It does have the original wording here, but it's doing exactly that. Now, why do I think this is a great commander? There's a lot of reasons. I know it might not look like much. It is 7 mana. That's a lot, but you are in green, so it shouldn't be a problem to cast it. Feels kind of like a legendary creature to me. I don't know. You maybe could change the name here a little bit to make it feel more like a legendary creature, I think. I think that's what they were going after when they printed this guy. Of course, it's a very old card originally from Alliances. First of all, the interesting thing here is you're in a snow theme, right? You want to be sacrificing snow forests to give your commander trample. So you're going to put snow forest in this deck. So then you're going to be in a little bit of a snow sub-theme. And there is some stuff that can give you some support there, which is interesting. You're going to be in a Voltron theme as well. I think Vigilance is going to be really, really important here with your commander because it has a tap ability and you're going to want to attack with it. So giving your commander Vigilance is going to be super important so that I can sacrifice that snow forest, give my commander trample, attack with it. It's not going to be tapped because it has Vigilance. And then later on my turn or on anyone else's turn, because you can activate this ability whenever you want, you can very easily kill your opponent's creature, right? Your commander is a 7/7. So your commander's tap ability is almost pretty much just tap destroy target creature, right? There's going to be very few creatures on the battlefield that you are not going to be able to remove with your commander's ability, which is fantastic. And then of course you can put 1,000-Year Elixir, Mage Right Stone, that kind of stuff in here so that you can be using that ability over and over again. That's actually a really, really good ability, right? And then on top of that, you're smashing your opponent opponent with your giant gorilla. And then of course, because you're in green, you can put those Ramanap excavator type of effects that will be getting lands out of your graveyard, right? There's lots of stuff in green that wants lands to be in your graveyard or will be getting lands out of your graveyard. So the whole sacrifice forest thing can be a bit of an advantage for you as well. I think this guy is a really fantastic build around. Coming in at number 5, Elderwood Scion, 3, a white and a green elemental 4/4, trample and lifelink. Spells you cast that target Elderwood Scion cost 2 less to cast. Spells your opponents cast that target Elderwood Scion cost 2 more to cast, which I think they would just call Ward 2 now. I'm not sure if they want to errata this or not, but it's essentially Ward 2. And obviously this is just a fantastic Voltron commander, right? And I think the best way to go with this is auras, right? Auras, when you cast them, are targeting your creature. So they're going to be reduced by 2. It's going to be really easy to pile auras onto your commander. But of course, you're not relegated to that. You can do anything, but also has the lifelink, right? And keep that in mind. Selesnya Colors also does the life gain thing really, really well. So you could put some of that stuff in here as well. Whenever you gain life, you get advantages out of it because you're almost guaranteed to be getting that life gain trigger on all your turns. So you could also go a little bit that route as well. Really interesting as a commander, I think. Coming in at number 6, another Beholder Death Kiss, 5 and a red Beholder 5/5. Whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks one of your opponents, double its power until end of turn. That alone is super interesting, a commander. You know, you just throw this guy down, and whenever a creature, either yours or one of your opponents, attacks another opponent, gonna double its power until end of turn. That's really fantastic. Obviously, goading is something you're gonna want to be doing here, or enticing attacking, which red does, of course, really, really well, right? Red does the forcing creatures to attack thing, whether it be goading or through other means. It does that really, really well. Also has Monstrosity X, and you can pay XX and a red. When it becomes monstrous, goad up to X target creatures your opponents control. So now your commander has a built-in goad mechanic on it. And if I built this deck, I would absolutely want to include bouncing or flickering as much as I can, because of course the monstrous ability you can only do once. So if you have a Conjurer's Closet in this deck, you can activate your commander's ability, pay 5 mana, goad 2 creatures, then on your end step, you can Conjurer's Closet, exile your Death Kiss, bring it back into play so that on the next turn, you're free to do that monstrosity ability again if you want to, right? I would also throw a Braid of Fire in this deck, because Braid of Fire is a card that's just going to give you lots and lots of free mana that you can dump into your commander's ability. This is one of the things I talk about with Braid of Fire, where it's fantastic in any deck where your commander has like a mana sink type of activated ability, of course, that you have to be able to use during your upkeep, which you can here. So now I can collect a bunch of mana on my Braid of Fire, dump it into my commander's ability, and then go nuts with that monstrosity. I think this would make for a really interesting build around for sure. Coming in at number 7, really interesting old card suggestion I got from one of my patrons, Mirrorwood Treefolk. 3 and a green Treefolk 2/4. Pay 2 red and a white. The next time damage would be dealt to Mirrorwood Treefolk. This turn, that damage is dealt to any target instead. What an interesting ability. So of course, first of all, our commander is going to be Naya, right? It's got that red and white, that Boros ability. So now this is a 3-color commander. It is a Naya commander, so that gives us a lot more options. And most importantly, we have red here, right? We want damage to be dealt to our commander so that we can redirect that damage. Now, again, you might want that Braid of Fire. You might want that something that is giving us the mana that we can use on our commander's ability, because it is a tad mana intensive. But I just think there is so many ways to go with this. I mean, you're going to want to be doing damage to your own stuff, right? I mean, obviously you can just chump with your commander all day long. Every time your opponents attack you, you can block with your commander and throw that damage around. It's going to be great for preventing your opponents from wanting to attack you. But also we can cast like a Blasphemous Act, for example. And when we do, the 13 damage that would be dealt to our Mirrorwood Treefolk, we can redirect to a player's face. There obviously is a ton of ways in Naya Colors to be dealing damage to our own creatures or to all creatures. And there's lots of creatures out there that also want to be dealing damage to them, right? You could put stuffy dolls and stuff like that in this deck, because we're probably going to be dealing damage to our own creatures a lot, right? This is sort of what I talked about in the Jacques Levert deck idea that I talked about on my original 10 deck ideas, where you are dealing damage to your own creatures. Jared Carthelian would be a great fit in this deck as well. And of course, Tamanoa would be a phenomenal fit in this deck, because it's a Naya creature that is going to be benefiting you from dealing damage, throwing damage around a lot from non-creature sources, which of course would be a lot of what's happening in this deck, so that would be a phenomenal fit as well. This doesn't seem like a great commander on its face, but once you start getting into it, I think it would be a really interesting build around. Coming in at number 8, Mind Rack Leech. 3 and 3 hybrid. Is it mana? So red and blue. It's a horror. It's a 4/4. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. Other red creatures you control get +1/+1. So again, we have that double anthem effect. So right out of the gate, there's a lot you can do there. Of course, if you have a red and blue creature, it gets both, right? If I have a creature that is both blue and red, it's going to get both of these anthems. So it's going to get a +2/+2. But of course, the thing that you're probably going to be building around is this last ability. Pay 4 hybrid. Is it mana? You may put a blue or a red creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. That's a really powerful ability. Of course, there's a lot you can do there. I can throw a Jin Kataxis in play for 4 mana. You know, I can throw any busted red or blue creature into play from my hand for only 4 mana at instant speed. Is this too powerful as a commander? Maybe. I don't know. It does cost 6. I've already talked about this Leech series quite a bit on this channel. I've already covered a few of them. They're all pretty fantastic build-arounds as commanders. And again, they sort of feel like legendary creatures too, with what they're doing, their names, right? It's a liege. Could this be one of those commanders that just immediately becomes a target as soon as it hits the table? Because for 4 mana at instant speed, you can put busted ridiculous creatures in red and blue on the table. Possibly. Nevertheless, it's obviously going to be a great build around. Coming in at number 9, Ghoul Leech. 3, a blue and a black zombie wizard 4/4. Pay 1, you may cast target creature card in a graveyard. When you cast it this turn, Ghoul Leech gains all activated abilities of that card until end of turn. So this card, again, just really feels like a commander. Even the art, everything about it just feels like a legendary creature. It has a very powerful ability. This is a card that has been used in the format for a long, long time, because for just 1 mana, you can cast creatures out of your graveyard or your opponent's graveyard, right? So that alone makes it a very interesting creature to have as a commander. It would be similar to a Scarab God in a way, where instead of just paying 4 mana to steal my opponent's stuff out of their graveyard or out of my graveyard, I'm actually casting it. That's kind of a big difference here. Because you are casting stuff from graveyards, you could put the stuff in this deck that is going to benefit you from casting from graveyard, of course. But the one thing that is sort of overlooked here a little bit is when you cast that card, Ghoul Leech gains all activated abilities of that card. So what you could also do a little bit is sort of a Marisol strategy, a little, right? A lot of times with Marisol decks, what people will do, they will combine different creatures' abilities that if you stapled those creatures' abilities on one card, now you can get really out of hand, and that's what you can do with Ghoul Leech as well. So there is that aspect as well. Yeah, you can just do it where I'm casting everyone's creatures from their graveyard, but also the activated abilities part, I think there's a lot you can do there as well. Even if it's just, I cast my Arcanus, the Omnipotent, from my graveyard, put it into play, and then wouldn't you know it, my Ghoul Leech can now tap to draw 3 cards until end of turn. So why don't I do that as well, right? So there's also that. I would probably, if I built this deck, throw as many creatures with activated abilities in the deck just for why not? Because my commander might get those abilities somewhere down the road, right? Coming in at number 10, though, is Emmerstern Predator. 2 black and a red vampire dragon 3/3 with flying, and there's a whole lots of interesting stuff going on. Whenever Emmerstern Predator becomes tapped, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on Emmerstern Predator. Sacrifice another creature, Emmerstern Predator gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. So when this guy came out in Keldheim, I immediately thought, man, does this ever feel like a legendary creature? I almost think that when they were developing this set, this originally was a legendary creature, and maybe they had so many legendary creatures from that set already, they decided to just make it a normal creature, because it really feels like a legendary creature to me. First of all, it is a vampire dragon, which is very interesting, and of course we're in Rakdos colors, so we can do a bunch of vampire tribal stuff, we can do a bunch of dragon tribal stuff, we can do both. All of that stuff will work here, so that's great, of course. But there's a lot going on with our commander, right? First of all, your commander is exiling stuff from graveyards, which is great. You know, you need graveyard exile in any commander deck, and having a commander that has that stapled on it is, of course, fantastic. Your commander's also putting +1/+1 counters on it, which is really, really important. So that's a theme that we can build around. And then, of course, your commander is a sack outlet, which a lot of stuff you can do there as well. You're in Rakdos Rakdos colors, which is going to love the aristocrat sacrificing theme. Again, we can throw a mayhem devil and stuff like that in there because we are going to be sacrificing a lot. Our commander gives itself indestructible, right? That is a really important part, and having stuff that can protect your commander from removal stapled on it, again, is always super, super important. And of course, when we activate that ability, we will tap our commander, which will then trigger the first ability, which is great. But of course, you always are going to want to have sack fodder lying around, right? For whenever somebody wants to cast a board wipe, you sack that little token creature you got lying around to save your commander from the board wipes. You're going to want to make sure you do that. There's a lot going on here that you can build around, and of course, fantastic art as well, which to me always plays into the feels like a legendary creature thing. So I think this guy would make for a great commander. And as usual, when I make these videos, I will be building one of these decks. So there will be a poll in the description below for you guys to vote on one of these commanders. Whichever one gets the most vote, I will actually build that deck and pretend it's a legendary creature, right? I'm just going to build the deck as if it was a legendary creature. It's not going to be technically commander legal, but you're going to talk to your play group or whoever you play with, see if it's okay. I think most people would be okay with having any of these creatures as your commander for your deck, but probably good to obviously have that rule 0 talk before you go ahead and do so. So vote in the poll below, and I will build one of these decks and put it in my Building Janky Decks series at some point going forward. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.